What's good, y'all? It's J Horror, and we back with another video. Today, we're gonna be reacting to Mr. Night Scares, 3 true, scary cemetery horror stories. Anyways, I'm not gonna waste your time. We're gonna hop straight into this video. Let's get it. 3 true, scary cemetery horror stories. Yes,
My
sir.
grandfather was always a strong
Story 3.
presence in my life. He was the kind of man who commanded respect without ever raising his voice.
Okay.
When he passed away, I felt like a piece of my world crumbled. Visiting his
Yeah,
grave
be like that,
became
bro.
a
I feel
ritual
that.
for me, a way to stay connected to the man who had taught me so much. The cemetery where he was buried wasn't far from my home. It was an old place with towering oak trees and weathered headstones that leaned slightly as if bowing to time. The paths were narrow, winding through the graves in a way that felt almost intentional, like they were guiding you through the memories of the people who rested there. I visited often, always bringing fresh flowers.
Bro, is it me or cemeteries? I wouldn't say. During the day, I wouldn't say it's unsettling. It's pretty chill, calm. But I'll say during the night, that's where it really get a lot more creepier. It might be a night thing. During the night, it's more eerie to say. I don't know. It might just be me.
Flowers to place at his headstone. It was a peaceful place, or so I thought. One evening, just before sunset, I decided to visit my grandfather's grave. The sky was a dull orange, the sun hanging low, casting long shadows across the cemetery. The air was cool, with a slight breeze that rustled the leaves above. As I walked along the familiar path, I noticed how quiet it was. Even the birds seemed to have gone silent, leaving only the sound of my footsteps on the gravel. I reached my grandfather's grave and stood there for a while, lost in thought. The headstone was simple, just like the man it marked.
Pain, man.
I placed the flowers at its base and said a few words, my voice barely above a whisper. As the shadows grew longer, I felt a chill creep up my spine, but I brushed it off as the cooling evening air. With a final look at the headstone, I turned and made my way back to my car. Just as I reached the cemetery gates, my phone rang. The sound was startling in the silence, and I fumbled for a moment before pulling it out of my pocket. The screen showed an unknown number, but I answered it anyway. "Hello," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the stillness. For a moment, there was nothing but silence on the other end. Then a voice spoke, low and familiar. It was my grandfather's voice. "Why did you leave so soon?" he asked, the words
What?
slow and deliberate.
Oh, nah.
I froze, my heart pounding in
Oh,
my chest.
no,
It couldn't be him.
sir.
It wasn't possible. He was gone. I
How?
knew that. But the voice on the other end of the line was unmistakably his. So intense that I nearly dropped the
Nah,
phone.
man, that's
"Who is
that's something else, bro.
this?" I stammered, but there was no response. The line went dead, leaving only the faint sound of the wind through the trees. I stood there, phone still in hand, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My legs felt weak, and I leaned against the cemetery gate for support. Eventually, I convinced myself that it had to be a prank, someone with a sick sense of humor. The voice had been too real, too familiar. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The memory of that voice haunted me, echoing in my mind every time I closed my eyes. Despite my fear, I knew I had to go
scared me
back to the
too.
cemetery. I needed to see my
Uh-huh.
grandfather's grave to reassure myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. The sun was bright that day, casting sharp shadows across the ground as I walked the now familiar path. Everything looked the same as it always had: the trees, the headstones, the narrow paths winding through the graves. But something felt different, an unease that I couldn't quite place. As I approached my grandfather's grave, I stopped in my tracks. There, a few feet away from the headstone, stood a figure. It was my grandfather. He looked just as he had when he was alive, dressed in his usual clothes, his hands folded neatly in front of him. His eyes were fixed on me, unblinking as if he had been waiting for me. I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were rooted to the
I
ground,
would've died
and my
that
breath
day.
caught in my throat. A chill ran down my spine, colder than anything I had ever felt before.
I would have died.
My mind screamed at me to run, to get as far away from that place as possible, but my body refused to obey.
Oh,
Then slowly, my grandfather's face began to change. His skin grew pale, his eyes hollow, his mouth twisted into a grimace that was nothing like the gentle smile I remembered. It was as if I was looking at a reflection of him, distorted and wrong. The figure took a step toward me, and that was when I finally found the strength to move. I turned and ran, not daring to look back. The path blurred beneath my feet as I sprinted toward the gate, my heart pounding in my ears. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers, trying to hold me back. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The fear that gripped me was stronger than anything I had ever felt.
bro, it's better.
When I
than-
finally reached my car, I threw myself inside and locked the doors, my hands trembling. I sat there for a long
As
time,
soon as I would
my
have
breath
seen,
coming in
as
ragged.
soon as I would have seen, bro, I'd have been like, yeah, nah, it's time to go. Cause, bro, there's just no way that your granddad is just posted up. And he not even alive. That would, nah.
Ragged gasps, my eyes fixed on the cemetery gate. I half expected to see the figure standing there, watching me, but the gate remained empty. I never went back to that cemetery. I couldn't. Whatever I saw that day, whatever called me on that phone, it wasn't my grandfather. It was something else, something that should never have been disturbed. The memory of that day still haunts me.
Your granddad
Before we get
is
into the next story,
not there.
if you come for the first time, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories.
you.
We need your support. Please share these stories with your friends and family.
Yes,
Thanks.
sir. Shout out Mr. Night Scares. Put his thing in the description.
I never thought working as a security guard at a cemetery would be this unsettling. It was supposed to be an easy job. Just watch over the place, make sure no one vandalizes the graves, and keep an eye out for any troublemakers. Most nights were uneventful, just me and the rows of tombstones under the moonlight. But then, things started to get strange. It all began about a month ago. I had just started my shift, walking my usual rounds with a flashlight in hand. The night was quiet, the kind of silence that felt too heavy, too thick. As I made my way through the cemetery, I noticed something out of place. There, standing by a grave, was a man. It was exactly 3 a.m., I remember, because I always checked my watch during my rounds. The man stood perfectly still, facing one of the older graves near the back of the cemetery. He was dressed in dark clothes, and from a distance,
It's one of them
I couldn't
things,
make
bro.
out much about him. Just that he was tall and had a kind of stillness about him that
It's one
was
of them things,
unsettling.
bro.
I called out to him, but he didn't respond. He didn't even seem to hear me. He just stared at the grave, completely motionless. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was a mourner, visiting a loved one. It wasn't uncommon for people to visit graves at odd hours, especially if they were dealing with grief. Still, something about this man seemed off. The next night, at exactly 3 a.m., I saw him again. Same grave, same stillness. He didn't move, didn't react when I called out. It was like he was frozen in time. The third night, when I saw him again, I knew something was wrong. This wasn't normal. Nobody visits a grave at the same time every night, especially not in the dead of night without making a sound or showing any sign of life. Curiosity got the better of me. I began to keep an eye on him, watching from a distance as he stood there, always at 3 a.m., always by that same grave. The way he stared at the tombstone, it was as if he was waiting for something, but what, I couldn't tell. The more I watched, the more unsettled I became. It wasn't just that he was there every night, it was the way he seemed almost detached from everything. Like he wasn't there, like he was a part of the cemetery itself. After a
Yeah,
week of
he
this,
probably
I couldn't
is.
take it anymore.
Probably dead.
I decided I had to confront him, to find out who he was and what he was doing.
Bro's gotta be dead.
That night, I waited until 2:45 a.m., hiding behind a large oak tree a short distance from the grave. At exactly 3 a.m., he appeared, just like before. My heart was pounding as I stepped out from behind the tree and walked toward him. As I got closer, I could make out more details. His clothes were old, tattered, even like they hadn't been washed in years. His skin was pale,
bro's
almost
dead.
gray, and his eyes, they were empty, void of any emotion or life. I called out to him again, my voice shaking. "Hey, what are you doing here?" He didn't respond. He didn't even blink. It was like he was in a trance, completely unaware of my
dead.
presence. I took a deep breath and walked closer, reaching out to tap him on the shoulder. As soon as my hand touched him, he turned to face me.
Ooh.
What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. His face twisted into the most horrifying expression I've ever seen. His mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin, showing teeth that were too long, too sharp. His eyes, once empty, were now filled with a kind of rage, a hatred that made my blood run cold. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All I could do was stare in terror as his face contorted further, the skin pulling back to reveal raw, decaying flesh underneath.
Oh my.
I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest, trying to get away from him. But he didn't move. He just stood there, grinning that terrible grin, his eyes locked onto mine. It felt like he was looking straight into my soul, and what he saw there filled him with that same rage. I knew I had to get out of there. I turned and ran as fast as I could, not daring to look back. I didn't stop until I was back at the entrance of the cemetery, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold on to my flashlight. When I finally dared to look back, the man was gone. The grave he had been standing by was empty, just like all the others. I didn't sleep at all that night. The image of his twisted face, those lifeless eyes, burned into my mind. The next day, I tried to find out more about the grave he had been standing by, but there was nothing unusual about it. It belonged to a man who had died over 50 years ago, someone with no family left to visit him. There was no reason anyone should be there, especially not at 3 a.m. every night. I continued my job at the cemetery, but I never saw the man again. Every night at 3 a.m., I'd hold my breath, waiting to see if he would appear, but he never did. Still, the fear lingered, that sense that something wasn't right, that something was watching me. To this day, I don't know what I saw or what that man was, but I'll never forget the terror I felt when I looked into his eyes and saw the darkness that lay behind them. Some things, I suppose, are better left alone, and some graves are best left undisturbed.
Story 1.
My name is Hazel. I always loved my father deeply, and after he passed away, I made it a habit to visit his grave regularly. It was late afternoon, with the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows across the cemetery. The air was cool, and the silence around me felt heavy, almost like a blanket pressing everything down. As I walked through the rows of graves, the crunch of leaves beneath my feet was the only sound I could hear. The cemetery was old, with towering trees stretching endlessly upwards, their branches gnarled and twisted. The wind whispered through the leaves, creating a soft rustling sound that gave me a strange sense of unease. I reached my father's grave, a simple stone with his name etched into it. I knelt, placing fresh flowers beside the headstone, the bright colors a stark contrast against the cold gray of the stone. My heart ached as I thought of him, the memories of his laughter and his warmth flooding my mind. I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to those memories, to feel close to him even though he was gone. When I finally opened my eyes, something caught my attention out of the corner of my vision. A man stood a few rows away, lingering near a grave that I didn't recognize. He was dressed in dark, old-fashioned clothes that seemed out of place, almost like he had stepped out of a different time. His face was partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, but what I could see of it seemed oddly blank, almost emotionless. Something was unsettling about him, something that didn't feel right. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just standing there. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. I stayed at my father's grave a little longer, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every few minutes, I glanced over at the man, but he didn't move. He just stood there, his gaze seemingly fixed on the grave in front of him. The longer I looked at him, the more uncomfortable I felt. Finally, I decided it was time to leave. I stood up slowly, brushing the dirt from my knees. The sun was dipping lower, casting the cemetery in an even gloomier light. I took one last look at my father's grave, whispered a quiet goodbye, and turned to leave. As I started walking back towards my car, I glanced over my shoulder. The man was still there, but now his head was turned slightly, as if he was watching me.
Oh, no.
My heart began to race, a sense of dread creeping into my chest. I quickened my pace, the leaves crunching louder under my feet as I hurried down the path. I looked back again, and my breath caught in my throat. The man was following me. He was walking slowly, almost leisurely, but there was
Yeah,
no
bro, hit
mistaking
that.
that he was coming
Right.
after me. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands
I'm
growing
ready.
clammy with fear. I walked
Nope,
faster,
I'm
trying to
ready.
stay calm, but every time I glanced back, he was there,
I'm ready.
matching my pace, always just far enough away that I couldn't see his face. Panic started to set in. The
I
cemetery was
am
large, and my
running.
car felt like it was miles away. I forced myself to keep moving, not daring to look back anymore. The feeling of being followed, of those footsteps echoing mine, was overwhelming. My breath came in short, sharp bursts, and I could feel my pulse throbbing in my ears. Finally, I saw my car at the edge of the cemetery. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by terror as I heard the sound of footsteps growing closer behind me.
Get up out of
I
there,
broke
man.
into a run, my feet pounding against the gravel path. I didn't dare look back. I just ran as fast as I could, the fear driving me forward. I reached my car, fumbling with the keys in my shaking hands. I could feel the man getting closer, the sense of his
Yeah, no,
presence
sir.
almost tangible. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut and locking it just as I saw him reach the edge of the cemetery. He stood there, just a few feet away, staring at me through the windshield. His
Yeah,
face
man,
was still
creepy
obscured by
ass.
the shadow of his hat, but I could feel his eyes on me, cold and unfeeling. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. I was frozen in place, unable to move, my heart
Bro.
hammering in my chest. Then, without warning, the man
No, sir.
turned and walked back into the cemetery, disappearing into the shadows of the
Bro, bro's a
trees.
weirdo, bro.
I sat there for a
what?
long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. I didn't know what had
Nah,
just
man, I would've been
happened,
gone, bro.
but I knew that I had to leave. I started the car and drove away, not daring to look back at the cemetery as I sped down the road. Later, when I finally calmed down, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. I told a friend about what happened, and she mentioned that others had seen a man like that in the cemetery before, a man who vanished before anyone could confront him. The thought sent chills down my spine. Who was he? Or rather, what was he? I still visit my father's grave, but now I go earlier in the day when the sun is high in the sky,
Yeah,
and I'm not alone with the shadows and whatever lingers among them.
man, that was a good video, man. Man, shout out to Mr. Night Scares. I will put his video in the description, his link. Hey, man. That was 3 true scary cemetery horror stories. Oh, man. I never really visit cemeteries, but if I was to, I'm definitely going during the day, never at night. It's just not happening. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. It's been J Horror, and I appreciate y'all for watching, and I'm out. Peace.